if you extrapolate exponentially, you just sound like a crazy. OpenAI is going to be $1 trillion company. Yeah, stuff is in this bull market right now, and it makes me nervous because it's too easy to get over your skis. It's too easy to drink the Kool-Aid. It's too easy to like believe your own hype. In 4 years, you can go from, Anthropic not being able to raise a round to, oh my gosh, this is going to be $1 trillion company. Anytime you see a platform where software is then eating that industry, the companies that win tend to be run by software engineers. So at Amazon, software engineers make all the decisions and they make all the money. Partnerships people don't. I think of my job much closer to like Rick Rubin and less close to like Warren Buffett. If you look at Ivan from Notion, he's just got a really opinionated perspective about the way software should be.
Awesome. Avichal, thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. So I noticed that you have a really cool watch on your wrist. Maybe you can show.
Sure.
Are you really into watches?
I am. It's sort of as a side effect. A friend of mine years ago was telling me about how watches have appreciated, and there's certain kinds of watches that have actually done really well relative to stocks. And I was like, oh, I wonder why. And I kind of went down that rabbit hole, and it turns out it's very similar to a lot of other markets like gold or Bitcoin or fine art, where there are all these sort of like underlying properties that are sort of drive the market. And once you sort of understand that they're all kind of the same, it's like, can you assess that it's real? Is it fixed supply or some limited? It's hard to make more of. It's portable. It's easy to transfer. It's a global liquid market. That it doesn't corrode. It's durable. Like all these sort of properties. You realize that all these sort of markets are driven by like the same underlying principles. And so I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And then the other sort of dimension to it, which is a little different than like investing in companies, is you can have some form of self-expression. So like what I like about this watch is it has what's called a GMT complication, and that was created because humans could fly, and so we could get on a plane in Europe and go to the United States or vice versa. And so pilots had to start tracking 2 different time zones, and as a result, people sort of needed this. We had to create a tool to solve a problem. And so it sort of, to me, is like, I like that aspect of it, the fact that humans had to create, this is a tool, and humans through technology sort of solve problems. And so a lot of the watches that I like, it's not just the store value piece, but there's sort of something symbolic about it. Like one of my other favorite ones is when the astronauts were going to the moon, NASA commissioned hey, we need a watch that will work in space. And so Omega created this watch.
Which one was it?
It was the Speedmaster, and it has a certain set of properties, like the way the glass. It's not sapphire, because sapphire can shatter and you could get into the parts on the space shuttle or on the module, and so they picked like a different material for that, and so you look at that thing, if you sort of understand the history of it, and you're like, oh wow, this is not just not just a watch, but it represents like humans going to space, and we needed to create a watch that could hold time and be super accurate, and you could do things with it while the astronauts were like going to the moon. So I think stories like that are super cool about beyond the store value piece of it, that you don't get in a lot of other things. I think art's like that too, or sort of like, yes, you can have the investment aspect of it, but like the art represents something. So it lets you have a little bit of self-expression in the mix too, I think.
That's really cool. So does this mean that now that we have so much technological advancements when it comes to time tracking, watch is more of this old school industry where it's not going to be as representative of technological advancements? Or do you think there's going to be digital analogs of watches that will continue?
Well, it's really interesting, actually. I hadn't thought of this until you asked. And this was not on the original sort of the set of things to talk about. It's really interesting because there's a parallel here to all the AI stuff that's happening. So what happened in the 70s in the watch market was, so these things used to be like tool watches, and then they started becoming more and more luxury. And so they're expensive. And there used to be these competitions where like, how accurate is your watch? And certain brands, the Swiss making sort of industry, the watchmaking industry has been doing this for decades, centuries. And they used to win. And the Japanese invented the quartz movement. And so the quartz movement came in and was more accurate than the mechanical watches. And so it basically killed that industry. So basically they stopped doing the competitions because the quartz movement was better and more accurate and way cheaper. And so from like the 70s to like the 90s, that industry basically imploded because, well, who's going to pay all this money for what is a tool? And now you have like a better electronic tool. So why would you pay 100 times the money for something you can buy for $10? And so the industry actually like recast itself, and it became sort of like a luxury good. It became a symbol of what can humans produce that machines can't produce, because it turns out a lot of these timepieces, like robots, you can't mass manufacture them. Like the degree of precision that you need, like you need a human hand, at least for now. You need a human hand to like make these things. And the fact that it takes, X 100 hours or whatever for a master craftsman who's trained for 25 years to do these things, it's sort of like proof of work in crypto, where it's like there had to be so what you're really wearing on your wrist is like proof that some human who is exceptional at their craft put 100 hours of their effort into the thing. And that's why the thing has value. And so what ended up happening, especially in the last, I'd say 15 years, is that the industry is bigger than it ever was. It actually rebounded and is now enormous. It's huge. And so I think there's actually like a funny, interesting lesson in there on the AI stuff, which is like in the short term, you think of these things as utilitarian. And so a lot of the work that humans do that is very utilitarian, like these things will eat up, and you'll say, well, why am I going to pay a human to do it if the AI can do this faster and cheaper? But I think what you might get as like an echo boom is, well, what are the things that humans can uniquely do that the AI can't do? And those things that provably a human could do, or only a human could do, actually end up being more valuable. And so you might get this sort of secondary effect where things that a human had to put 100 hours into or 1,000 hours into to create that thing are even more valuable on the other side of sort of the commodification of the utility. So it's kind of an interesting parallel. So it actually, if you sort of understand that, you might think about, like, from a career perspective, like what are the things that uniquely humans can do actually are probably 10x more valuable on the other side of AI, rather than like everything just going to zero.
Two thoughts. One, I think that's already happens with the fashion industry too. Obviously, things that are produced by human craftsmanship, like look at the luxury bags or luxury clothes, they cost a lot more than things that are produced by machines. Another parallel is music. There is a lot of conversation around AI music. What's going to be the purpose of human musicians if you can just go and generate whatever's going to tickle your emotions or your brain? But actually, musicians who are going to be amazing live will probably be a lot more valuable and better. And so that's just a thought. And a question is, so what do you think are going to be those industries for someone listening and thinking where to go?
Yeah. I think there's and one way to ask that question is like, what are the moats on the other side of AI being smarter than us? I think for some time, like physical world stuff will be a moat, because AI is mostly digital. Maybe robots sort of overtake us in 10 years or something, but there are constraints there. So I think anything around like physics and biology, so like, fundamental energy, or, how these biological systems work, where you can't, at least today, you can't simulate them. Maybe in 10 years that changes. And so you just have to run the experiments. And so I think those things are real defensible things that probably become more valuable. So for example, if you look at health, where do people spend money? Like once they have enough money, once they have enough surplus, a lot of people spend it towards their health, because they're like, well, what's the one thing I can't buy, or that I'm willing to spend a lot of money on is being healthier and living longer, so I can be with my family or do the work that I want to do. And so those probably do really well. I think anything that has an artificial regulatory moat or constraint becomes a real thing. So anything that you have to get licensing, or the government sort of controls the supply and demand of for some strategic reason, probably is still very defensible. And then sort of in speaking with this, like what is fundamentally human, I think there are going to be lots of things that are still mediated through humans, where it's a human on the other side making a decision. Those things actually probably become more valuable. So for example, I don't think the government anytime soon is going to outsource procurement decisions around defense or war to an AI. So what that means is there's some person at the DOW, the Department of War, formerly Department of Defense, and that person has to make a lot of decisions about who gets contracts, or which weapons we purchase, or which defense technologies or drones or whatever. And so And that person probably came up through the military in some form. And so maybe they went to West Point or they went to the Naval Academy, and they're 25 or 30 years into your career. So if you're somebody who has a 25-year relationship with that person, you went to the same school as them, or if you worked with them and you were deployed to Iraq together or something, there's no substitute for that, right? And so strategically, you're actually in a really good position. And so if you look at like defense contractors, for example, it's not investment advice, obviously, but take like some small business that works with the government. Those things don't trade at huge multiples to revenue because they're very sort of people-heavy businesses. But you might argue that those things become kind of like the luxury watch industry. They become more valuable because the real asset that they have is these human relationships. And a lot of the work that they need to do that the humans had to do, now the AI can do. And so what you actually have is like a critical asset in the relationship, and actually AI is going to make your business way, way more efficient. And so actually the margins in a bunch of these businesses go up. And so you might argue that there's this entire category of businesses that on the other side of AI is like way more valuable. And you can sort of poke through and I think identify a bunch of those in a bunch of industries. But those are 3 examples, I think.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think human relationships, anything that has to do with it, unless it's replaceable by AI, is going to be really valuable. And this reminds me of this tweet that I saw the other week from DHH on hard work, because there's, a lot of narrative in the Valley about grinding and working really hard, which has always been the case, and like living in your office and sleeping very little. And he was like, well, success is actually 3 things. It's hard work, sure. It's luck. And then your ability to work with people and human relationships. So I just generally agree with that advice.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's the other thing I was thinking sort of selfishly, which is why we're in the business that we're in, is I think in the earliest stages of starting a company, from a founder perspective, so much of it is who you surround yourself with. And so that sort of like seed or Series A decision where you're first taking money to start building the company, even before you have product market fit, even before you know if it's going to work, that's a very human decision. And so I suspect actually our business in venture capital, where we're working with founders so early, actually becomes
more
valuable because those decisions there's still a founder who's going to make those decisions. Like I think at some point we'll have AI started companies and they'll raise money on the internet through crowdsourcing or whatever. But before, even in that world, we'll have a lot of human founders. And so I think our business will sort of similarly be defensible for that reason, because that human relationship piece, I think, is really important.
So I definitely want to spend time talking about, your decision of starting Electric and VC, et cetera, but I want to dive more into where you come from, your background. Sure. So I found, first of all, you have a really amazing career, from starting your own company to running important projects at Google and Facebook, to then running Electric and being a partner at YC as well. In my research, I found this article where you were 24 years old and it was you and your co-founder being interviewed about PrepMe. And on there, you said that your guiding principle in life is opportunity is a luxury. So I'm curious where it comes from, and is that still your guiding principle?
There are many guiding principles. That's definitely one of them. I think, we're just so fortunate to be here in Silicon Valley. We're just surrounded by amazing people and amazing opportunities, and you can get capital. And most of the world doesn't work that way. And so, I think it's people talking about privilege, and I think there's sort of too often people conflate like money and privilege, and I think money obviously is a form of privilege, but I think an even greater privilege which money can buy you is these opportunities and this sort of access, which you don't necessarily need money to have access to if you're in this place. And it's because if you have those opportunities, then what you can really do, which I think is what's really the best part about our job, is taking the uniqueness of an individual human and turning it into a product and then getting that out to everybody. Because, all the best products that people build are really, it's sort of like an extension of who they are, and their sort of values or beliefs or, what they want to say into the world. It's really like, kind of like one of the things I've come to believe over the last, I would say like 5 to 10 years in particular, is I used to, and I think most people still do, think of startups through the business lens, so through like a utilitarian, I'm solving a problem kind of lens. And I think that's certainly an aspect of it. But the thing I've really come to appreciate is I think the right way to think about these entities is actually more as an artistic endeavor. And the person who's starting these things much more like a painter or a musician or more of an artist. And the reason is because the ones that are really, really successful, and have durability, the person is really trying to express a worldview. They're trying to say something into the world and it resonates. So I'll give you an example. Like if you look at Ivan from Notion, he's just got a really opinionated perspective about the way software should be. And he spent his entire career building content creation tools. So he started at Apple, he worked at this Sequoia-backed startup called Inkling, and he was always just building content creation tools. And it's because he comes from this mindset of if you give humans a bunch of tools, they'll create really great things. And he's very opinionated about the way that should be. But I think that's why Notion is successful. He's very opinionated about what it means to create good software that allows other people to create things. But I think that's why that company is so successful. And that's why I think it will continue to be successful, is because he has sort of a philosophical perspective on what he's trying to do. And I think all the great founders are like that. And then what that does for us is it sort of recasts my job, as I think of my job much closer to like Rick Rubin and less close to like Warren Buffett. Because like really what we're trying to do is we're trying to find these people who have something interesting to say in the world. It just happens to be that the medium that they're expressing themselves through is code. And that is an artistic endeavor in my opinion. And so, I think the sort of like, if you understand all of these things, you start to understand, kind of back to this idea of like the human relationship piece of it. Like actually, I think the people who understand founders as artists, like I think Mark Andreessen's done a great job with this. I mean, like people may not realize this, but I think you can see the impression that Mike Ovitz and CAA had on Andreessen Horowitz. He sort of like realized the same thing in Bill Andreessen in that way. And I think that's why they're successful. They sort of like at their core, they sort of understand the founder as artist, and they're like, we'll take just the way CAA takes care of everything else around the talent. Andreessen sort of like takes care of everything around you. And I think that's exactly the right model. All of these things, to your original point, it all comes back to this sort of opportunity as a luxury. Like the opportunity to have all these experiences and like learn all these things is like the real luxury. That even money would not buy you these insights. It's like those opportunities are really what unlocked all these insights.
So many bookmarks. Do you think that artists, founders who are artists, or not necessarily founders, people who are expressing a strong point of view in the world, have to oftentimes go against what the feedback from the world is? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'm asking that is because Rick Rubin famously says that you got to really listen to your own intuition, kind of block out everything that your audience seemingly wants, because you got to show them what they might actually want and stay committed to your point of view. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I generally agree. Another way to put it is you have to do both, right? You have to listen to the market. You have to understand your users. You have to have empathy for those people and solving their problems. All of those things are true. But I think that doing a startup that's actually going to be a durable thing, an interesting and new thing in the world, how do you cut through all that noise, right? So there's just so many companies getting created. There's so many people in the world that could create companies. How do you cut through the noise? I think the way you cut through the noise is authenticity. And you have to say something into the world where people are like, oh yeah, that person's actually just being themselves. So like right now, Hunter Biden is just going viral on Twitter, right? And it's just because he's being himself, right? And it's
great.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? He's phenomenal. He's so good at Twitter. And this is why Donald Trump is president. Right? He is who he is, and he's authentic. And I think that, humans, like we have this capacity to understand authenticity. And the reason we have that is if you go back to I think a lot of things you can understand from the primal human brain, if you just sort of think about how society worked. So humans, when we were in the small tribes, we had to be really, really good at understanding what's real and what's not real. From an information flow perspective. Is this person signaling something to me? Or are they telling me something that I should be listening to? If I meet somebody from another tribe, like, can I trust them? There's all these subtle things. And so our brains are really good at understanding when somebody's lying to us. We can kind of feel it. And that authenticity, I think, we kind of have a sixth sense for. And it sort of like hits a part of your primal brain where it lets you relax and say like, okay, this person is actually who they say they are. They're not a threat in some sense. Like, I know what I'm getting. And if you think about a market is just a collection of humans making decisions. And so actually markets are really good at sussing out authenticity. And so if you're really authentic and you say things into the world that you authentically believe, somehow the market can pick up on that. And a collection of humans will see it and say like, oh yeah, this person's actually telling me the truth. Maybe I should listen. And so you at least have a shot. Now, your product has to be good. You have to like solve a real problem. You have to, make money. Like all those things have to be true, but you don't get a shot unless you're authentic. And so that authenticity, then the question is, well, like, how do you become authentic? And I think that is actually the intrinsic exercise, right? That's like the Rick Rubin exercise. Is like, well, what are you trying to say? What is it that you can say that nobody else can say? Can you say a thing that when people hear it, they're like, oh yeah, that had to be that person, right? And if you do that, if you get that right, then people might actually give you a shot. So there's all of this extrinsic stuff, like pick a big market, like what's your CAC, what's your GTM? There's all these things, those are extrinsic. But I think it's just as an intrinsic exercise, right? It's like, it had to be Zuck that created Facebook. It had to be Larry and Sergey that created Google. It had to be Ivan that created Notion. It had to be Dylan that created Figma. Like once you start looking at these companies, you're like, oh yeah, this is just an extension of this person.
It's like a founder market fit.
It's a founder market fit, founder company fit, founder product fit, founder culture fit. Like Google's culture is so good at allowing people to have space to go solve hard problems. And so they operate like a research lab, and it's because Larry and Sergey came out of these PhD programs. And so what that means is they're terrible at firing people. They just don't know how to do it. But it's because you don't fire people from a PhD program. Like maybe that thing that you're working off on the corner actually ends up being a giant breakthrough. So we'll leave you alone for 3 years. But that means that they are really not that strong at solving commodity technology network effect business problems like payments or social networks. They really struggle with those kinds of businesses. Because, the Google approach of solving, let's say, social networking or messaging was like, hey, let me build circles. Let me build this like better way to do social networking, or with something like Google Meet or, the 18 communication products they've had. It's like, hey, let me do like real-time facial detection in the browser to put a cap on your head in the browser. And you're like, wow, that's amazing technology, but I just want to send an emoji, right? And so you look at Google and they built the operating system, Android, but they didn't get WhatsApp on top of it. They just missed that opportunity altogether. And it's because it's a commodity technology, right? So that culture is an embodiment of the founder and their beliefs, and then it leads the company to be successful in certain places. And so if you understand all of that, then you can sort of say like, yeah, there are going to be certain things that my company is really good at, or that my startup is really good at, that we should pursue. And there are actually sets of things that we're not going to be good at that we shouldn't pursue. But all of that is actually intrinsic, right? You really have to understand yourself and what you're good at and what your company is and all these things. Which too often I think founders are so focused on the extrinsic that they don't spend time thinking about the intrinsic, and like, why are you the right person to solve this problem? Why are you the right person to pursue this opportunity?
Yeah, yesterday I had a conversation with Kasser from Applied Intuition, and yeah, he's amazing. And he was saying that historically, Peter and him have been building Applied Intuition in a way that can be, can run without them, quote unquote. But in the end of the day, the company absorbs founders' quirks, the modes of operation, and the reality is that you can't really run a company without the founders being who they are, because everything is an extension of them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
I'm curious, what point of view have you been trying to express throughout your life and career?
It's an interesting question. I think the thing I realized, the through line in a lot of these things, I was really fortunate that the commencement address I had was that infamous Steve Jobs commencement address.
Okay, cool. Nice. I was
in the audience for that.
That is very lucky.
Pretty awesome. And he had this line about how you can only sort of connect the dots looking back. And so when we were starting Electric, sort of the through line that I had that I realized was that the thing that I'm most drawn to is systems and tools and technologies that allow people to take the things that they're uniquely gifted at and actually succeed, and accelerate all of those things. And the sort of fundamental root philosophy of that is, I think that we make progress, like at the species level, we make progress because you have relatively small numbers of outliers that find new ways to push things forward. You can't really know who those people are at scale. It's just, we're lucky that we have a lot of them. And so that might be something like, Einstein and some physics and science, or it might be, on the company level, like an Elon, at a country level, like a Lee Kuan Yew. Like, these sort of individuals can emerge and really catalyze a lot of change in a good and positive way. And that's actually, if you think about it, a pretty philosophically opinionated view, that we should identify those people and we should give them disproportionate resources, because that's how you affect change and make things better for everybody. For example, like, interestingly, arguably, the entire country of Singapore may disagree with that premise. If you look at how their economy is set up, if you look at how their education systems are set up, the Nordic countries would disagree with that. But I think that's what actually things like capitalism or startups or gifted education or arts schools, that's actually what they do. What they do is they find those people and then they give them disproportionate resources. And to be clear, I don't just mean this in a like utilitarian scientific sense. Like, this is how societies make progress. Like, you have to find people who make us think about what society should be, or what culture should be, or how we should treat each other, all of these things fundamentally differently. And so that's why, for example, like, I think dedicated art schools are really important. But that's a pretty opinionated view to say, like, actually we should just be giving like 10 to 100x more resources to the outliers. And like I said, I think entire countries would disagree with that. So once I sort of realized that, I realized that, like, the through line in like the education company that I'd done, or like the investing that I was doing, or like the philanthropic work that I was doing, it was all sort of that. It was like, oh, what it's all about for me is finding those people and then giving them disproportionate resources, because you have so much leverage. If we had, like, again, setting aside the politics of it, like, if you had 100 Elons, you probably get to space way faster.
Probably.
And like, if you think humans should be spacefaring, then that's a good thing. And you could pick your favorite person, right? There should just be 100 more of them, 100x that number. And I think today we probably haven't identified more than maybe 10% of those people, and just by the raw numbers of it, right? So like there's 7 billion people. How many of those people even have access to the basics? But how many of those people, just by the numbers, I mean, the United States is like 400 million people. How many of those people live in parts of the world where they are essentially like genetic outliers, but we have no system to identify those people and get them those resources? And so that to me seems like a civilization level thing that you should try to crack. Like, if you could just find those people and then give them resources, then everything else would sort of take care of itself. And I think historically, the institutions in society that did that the best were the great universities of the world. So like Stanford or Harvard or Oxford. And the setup was, we're going to create a system that has a great brand. And so people will find us. And we'll give those people access to ground truth. We'll get them connected to professors or graduate students or the cutting edge research, or the best ways to think about these problems. We'll get them access to a network of peers who can accelerate everything that they do, and alumni. Often there's some sort of scholarship involved. And so, a little bit of money, fellowship of some sort, so you can afford to come here. And we'll sprinkle in a little bit of like, hey, you deserve to be here. Like, you're great. Like, we're actually great at picking people who do amazing things, and you deserve to be here. And that magic formula is extremely, extremely successful. And those universities have served, I think, a really good purpose in society, setting aside kind of how they operate today. Because I think some of those places have lost sight of that core mission. What's also really interesting about that as like a societal construct is it's really, really defensible. It's a very durable thing. So, for example, Oxford is actually older than the Magna Carta. just like crazy to think about that this thing has existed for 1,000 years.
Wow.
Right. Or like Harvard is 400 years old. It's like, these are remarkably durable institutions, arguably like right up there in terms of durable entities with like the church, right? Like religion is perhaps like the only thing more durable than these institutions that serve this purpose in society of finding the outliers and empowering them. And so I think like even kind of like from a market perspective, that's telling you something. That's telling you that like that fulfilling that purpose in society is something that is actually really important. And if you get it right, you can actually build something that actually lasts. And so when I think about our business, that's actually basically what we do, right? We have the same basic formula as Stanford or Harvard or MIT, which is we're trying to build a brand. So the best people in the world will find us. We give them access to ground truth because we happen to know a bunch of what's happening in certain domains. And a bunch of those things are counterintuitive. We give them access to peers that can accelerate everything they do because who you know matters as much as what you know. In the grand scheme of things, we're seed and Series A investors. We give people, $250, $2 million, like $5 million. Like in the grand scheme of things, not that much money, especially these days. Like, that won't even buy you a GPU rack, right? And we sprinkle in this little like, hey, we've worked with great founders. We've been fortunate to work at many of these places and invest in these companies at the earliest stages. And Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, today did not look that way when you were 22 or 25. Like we know what that looks like, and you're in that same category. Like you're capable of that. And sometimes that's what you need.
What does that look like?
I think it's a little bit of an X factor. I wish I had a better articulation for it, other than like when you meet somebody, you kind of know. You're just like, I think this person has that like raw ability to do that. You need to be smart enough, obviously. You need to sort of have clarity of thought, clarity of purpose. But there's something about the ability for these people to like catalyze things around them and just get them done that you're like, wow, that's remarkable that you just managed to do that.
Did you get better at spotting that talent with time and with your own experience, or do you think you always had the ability to discern? Yeah,
a little bit of both. Which is why I think we ended up in this business. It's kind of funny actually. I've certainly gotten better at it. And it's just more data points into the machine learning system in the brain, right? You just get better. But I think for whatever reason, I happen to be pretty well wired at identifying those people. I have theories on why, but I think so I started angel investing in
2012, according to your LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, I was investing in a couple of friends' companies that I invested in, but I would say seriously maybe like 2014ish, and sort of like actually pursuing it. And I have to go back and do the number that I haven't looked at in a long time, but I think of like the first 30 or so companies I invested in, something like 10 ended up being worth more than $1 billion, and like several of them ended up being worth more than 10 billion. And so I looked at that sort of return profile and had this sort of realization. I was like, wow, maybe I'm actually way better at finding entrepreneurs than I am actually at being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I should just do that. And I had a bunch of people who were looking at this when I was doing this back in like 16, 17. They were like, hey, your track record here is really good. Like this, this is pretty remarkable. And so sort of a little light bulb went off. I was like, oh, I think I just have this little ability to spot these people and sense it. I don't know why, but I can. And so maybe that should actually be my startup. Maybe that should actually be my company, is like finding those people and figuring out how to get them the resources that they need. But I've certainly gotten better at it. But yeah, I think I was just sort of blessed in some way to be able to spot those people.
When did you realize that spotting outliers was the point of view that you wanted to express in the world?
I think it's probably about 2017, 2018.
Okay, so it wasn't reflecting back on your portfolio and how people are doing.
Yeah, it was a little bit on the other side of that. I mean, some of those things started to work early, and so it was like, oh, these things are working. And so Curtis, my co-founder of Electric, he and I, I left Facebook at the end of 2016. He left in 2017, and so we were just hanging out in 2017. I was as our business partner. Y Combinator. And Curtis and I would hang out a bunch, just have long lunches and talks and conversations. And it's sort of through that, that's like an intrinsic exercise, right? It's a little bit of like co-founder therapy, you know, so sort of like talk through stuff, like what you want in life. Like
what was Curtis doing at the time?
So Curtis was my co-founder at the company that we sold to Facebook. And he was a very senior engineer at Facebook, and he built a lot of infrastructure and tooling and some products there. But at that point in 2017, we were both free. And so we were trying to think about what our next company would be. And so we were sort of angel investing and poking around with ideas and trying to figure out what the world was going to go, what we wanted to do. So a lot of it was we would literally have, 1, 2, 3 hour lunches and just like sit and talk and try to figure out what we wanted to do. So a lot of those insights sort of came out of
conversations.
It's kind of like therapy. You just talk and you sort of say something and you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? You sort of like talk through it.
Yeah. Do you process the world more through talking?
I think I do. Yeah. It helps me structure my thoughts. The talking and writing, I think, really help me. There's an intuition in here. This is my process. I know everybody's different. Like you can look at how there's some great videos you can find on YouTube about like how different hip hop artists will like find their lyrics, and some people will like scribble everything. Eminem like writes.
Yeah, Eminem writes everything. Yeah,
and Jay-Z doesn't. Like Rick Rubin's talked about this. He just sort of like thinks about it. Or like Lil Wayne will like, just sort of it's in there and it comes out, and he'll forget that he even said it. Right? There's interviews of him getting like stuff he's written down, and he's like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! Who said this?" And it's like, "It's you, dude." So everybody's different. At least for me, the process is like I have an intuition. There's something that's in there and I can kind of feel it and I can kind of believe it. And then I talk it through with somebody or I write it down, and that helps me crystallize the right way to express it. So that's sort of what I think the process is. It's a combination of talking and writing.
How do you pick the person that you talk to about different things?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think I'm that deliberate about it, but I think what's happened over time, a lot of the people that we work with at Electric today are people that we've worked with for, 10 plus years. In the case of Curtis, Curtis and I went to college together, so I've known him 20 plus years. He was in my freshman dorm. So, I think it's sort of almost like survival of the fittest. It's like whoever's managed to be my friend for 20 years is a good person to just talk through stuff with. So a lot of it is quite organic. There's like a small number of people where if I just sort of talk through it with them, it makes sense. I'm very fortunate to have some very, very smart people who are themselves very thoughtful and accomplished. And so they have really good perspective and they can push back in the right ways, which then helps sharpen the idea.
I want to come back to why and how you decided to start Electric. Yeah. But I wanted to first ask about, again, to your 24-year-old self, wanted to meet Elie Wiesel. That's the person that you wanted to meet the most. Yeah. Why him?
Well, it goes back to this. We were talking about this too. Is like what books are really impactful, and I think he has such a phenomenal story, and I think he's such a phenomenal storyteller. And I think that's why like the Bible is like a book that everybody should read in the West, and I think that's why the Gita is a book that everybody should read if you want to interface with India, because I think humans. There's like the abstract things that we should believe, and then there's the stories we tell ourselves. And the stories are much easier to remember. So our brains are just wired that way, probably because even before we had written writing, we had oral tradition, right? And so our brains are wired to absorb and remember stories and remember the lessons from us. That's why you got to tell little kids stories. And that's how they learn. And so, I think people who have had unique life experiences and are able to convey those in a story that people will remember is that's a superpower. I think that's a really, really important thing. And I think it's, again, at the society level, I think that's how we make progress. Like if we can tell those stories and remember those stories, then we can actually transmit knowledge. I think it's also really important because if you understand the structure of these stories, then I think you better understand how to communicate with people, or you can understand the perspective that they're coming from. And so you can understand their frame of reference. If you understand, like in the West, I think if you have deeply internalized the stories of the Bible, you can have a conversation with somebody and understand why they believe what they believe and the structure and the framework of that, or how to communicate with them in a way that they will understand. And so I think people who are uniquely gifted at telling stories, I think that's sort of a superpower that I aspire to have, that I wish I had.
Do you feel like you've gotten better at telling stories?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a part of the job. It's I think not just like as a startup founder, like you have to tell the story of how you get funded. Then you have to tell the story to your first few people that you bring on your team of why this is the place they should be. And then as the company gets bigger, you have to tell different stories, and you have to tell the story of why you got started, and you have to tell the story at different levels, right? You got to tell the story to the people who are just coming out of school and this is their first job, and you have to tell the story to Wall Street, and you have to tell the story to your board members. And so you're sort of chief storyteller, right? In addition to being CEO. So the executive part of it is like making the decisions. But so much of the job is telling stories. And so I think for anybody who's successful, at a certain point, it's like you can be smart, you can have the technical skills, you can have whatever, insight. But more likely over time, the cap is not those things. The cap is actually your ability to tell stories.
How do you get better at telling stories?
Yeah, well, I think you're basically rate limited by the stories that you read. Like I think you can only be as good as the inputs, right? If you think of these as like machine learning systems, and so the more good inputs that you can get, then your brain can sort of transform those. And some people's brains are better at transforming those things into unique output. And so there's some natural abilities there, and then there's some abilities that you can hone. But I think it starts with like the more inputs that you can get, the better.
What are your favorite recent stories that you have consumed?
Oh, a lot of it for me is it's just I spend so much of my time in this one world now that it's usually either stories of it's personal stories more so than like sort of grandiose stories. And so a lot of it for me is in the one-on-one conversations that we have founders, it's like, well, why are you doing this thing? Or like, where do you come from or why? And so those stories to me, I think are actually the most interesting now. And kind of in some sense, in like an AI context, it's like the unique data is the interesting data. And so like anybody can go read a published book. Not everybody can go talk to a successful but relatively unknown founder and understand their story, and get them to tell that story. So to me, those like sort of unpublished word of mouth, you sit at a dinner table with somebody and have a conversation, that those are actually the really interesting stories.
That's the real alpha.
That's the real alpha. Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to your background and career. So when you went from starting your own company to Google, to Facebook, to YC, before you realized that you actually wanted to find outliers and explicitly bet on them, what were you looking for in all of these transitions?
It was different at different stages. I think early in my career, a lot of it was just about learning and being surrounded by the right people. And so going to Google at that time was such a special place to be. Is probably what Anthropic and OpenAI, a couple of these places are right now. Where it's just like the density of talent was just so remarkable at the time. So it's like the mid 2000s. And so, Google had not acquired, there's no Android, Google had not acquired YouTube yet. Like it was like a crazy time to be there, to go through all of that. And so a lot of it was just being around the smartest people and learning as much as I could. And then I think, by the first startup, it was really to solve a problem that we cared about. We were building essentially machine learning plus education and trying to personalize content delivery, in that domain. In the second startup, we sort of realized we made just a bunch of first-time founder mistakes. We picked a bad market. We didn't execute well. And so we wanted to do something where we were much more strategic about it. And
we had a different co-founder, right?
Curtis was the co-founder in the second startup, yeah. And Curtis had a previous startup too, which was also sort of like a small exit. And so we both sort of realized all the same sort of insights. And so for the second one, the way we thought about it was, the realization was that if you really do want to have affect change and do good things in the world, the business has to work and the business has to scale. And so you need to have certain properties like being in the right market. And so we were very deliberate about kind of how we did it. And then we ended up in a situation where the product was kind of working. At the time, this was early Android, this was like 2011. We had hundreds of thousands of downloads, and probably, I have to go back and look, we're probably approaching 1 million. And which was real at the time, like in 2011. but the unit economics of the business didn't make sense for what we were doing. And so we had to basically get acquired. And that was the right, rational thing to do. And again, we sort of optimized for just being around the right people. And Facebook, in early 2012, before the IPO, the talent density just reminded us of Google in the early days. We're like, oh, this is going to be an important company in the world, which obviously it turned out to be. And so we were sort of motivated by that again. And so, after that, I think things changed, and they changed a little bit because we were so fortunate to be there at a time where the stock did really, really well, and the acquisition set us up. And so we ended up being financially successful enough that we could then sort of enter this, well, what do I really want to do phase, in addition to being surrounded by smart people, and now we can do anything. And so that forced a lot of that introspection. This is where, this is actually a perfect example we were talking about before with storytelling, right? It's like, that, arc that we had, I think is an arc that a lot of people go through, which is like early on, you're just trying to learn. But a lot of what your sort of orientation is as a founder is scarcity mindset, which is you're hungry for every single opportunity. It's not just that opportunities are a luxury, but it's like you're worried that any given opportunity will
go away.
Yeah. And so you're sort of like frenetic. You're trying to like pursue every single opportunity that you can. And it's a luxury to end up in a situation where you don't have to do that, where you can be really deliberate about the opportunities that you pursue. But I think that has to come with some degree of success that you've already achieved, because that allows you to be patient, and that allows you to think about what you really want, because even the opportunities that you pursue have a cost. There's an opportunity cost in your time and your attention and your focus. And so you can be much more deliberate about these things. And that's kind of, I think, what that acquisition gave us. It gave us the opportunity and the luxury to be deliberate about what we want to do next. So we take our time and really pick the right thing and be deliberate about how to go about achieving that. But it was certainly downstream of having enough, financial success, which is a relatively, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively low bar. Like, you don't need to be a billionaire. But I think having enough in the bank that you're like
having safety.
You're like, okay, I'm not going to starve. I can like afford healthcare. There's some base level there that a lot of founders don't have. You're just sort of like always in that mode of like, we're running out of money. We're gonna, this thing's gonna burn to the ground. How do we succeed? But back to this like sort of story idea. I think it's like, you can tell people that. You can say like, hey, look, you want to be really deliberate about the things that you pick. You don't want to run after every opportunity. You don't want to just like fast track your way to $1 million because you might leave like a generational opportunity, like your life's work on the table. But that's easy to say, right? It's hard to like live through and for a founder. And so like I talk about this with our founders sometimes, but it's sort of like, if you look at the life story of the Buddha, and again, I think these like religious stories, like, the Buddha or Gita or, my like favorite parable in the Bible is Matthew 25. This parable of the sheep and the goat. And I think these stories are like really powerful. And so if you look at the life of the Buddha, like he had to be a prince before he could go on the journey that he went on, right? Because the sort of like, hey, look, money doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's like been there, done that.
Yeah, and it's like, if it's like a poor person telling you that, it doesn't have the same credibility in some sense as the person who has the thing. And so that's why even if you look at like a lot of the most famous self-help people, they sort of follow that pattern, right? They had to be successful first. And then like every rich person tells you money doesn't matter, right? And so there's like this weird double-edged sword to it, right? But I think that's part of the journey. And so for like a lot of founders, it's actually, back to this idea of like the intrinsic motivation. I think for a lot of founders, there's a really deep tension of what they want to do and the reality that they're faced with in front of them. And actually, if they had $5 million in the bank, they might actually do a different thing. But they realize that like the path to getting $5 million in the bank is to do a certain set of things. And so that's what we're going to do. And people can tell that. Back to this idea of authenticity, like you can kind of tell.
Why are they doing that?
Why are they doing it? And so as an investor, like we really want to be working with the people that are like, I'm doing it for these sets of reasons. And that's not to say that this set of people is misguided or anything. I actually think people should do that so that they can go over here. but you have to be honest with yourself about what the motivations were. And so I think probably for that like first two startups, we were as motivated by like, hey, it would be really nice to exit a company and have some liquidity as we were about the thing that we're doing. And now we're just motivated by the thing that we're doing. And so it's just compounded in a different way. It's just like the world can somehow tell that we're not trying to do it because there's money involved. We're doing it because there's a set of things we want to say and do in the world. And somehow people can tell. And so those are also the types of people that we then try to work with.
So for a founder who is doing a startup because of the scarcity, they want to exit, they want to make some money, maybe there is another set of reasons that's not just intrinsically driven. Where should they go as far as pitching to investors? If a lot of investors, are looking for people with that intrinsic motivation and story.
Yeah. Well, I think you'd still do the pitches to VCs, and you can raise money and you can sell a company for $100 million and walk away making a bunch of money. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You just have to be really smart about making sure that the fund math makes sense. And that the math for your business, the industry that you're in, and how much money you're going to raise, all of that sort of lines up. So you can still be rational about it. And so, I think the mistake would be taking a bunch of money from somebody that wants you to pursue a generational opportunity. You see that happen. There's this tension with a lot of founders that are like, the board's not going to let me sell the company. And it's because, well, what you did was you signed up for an opportunity where somebody's saying, no, like the only way this makes sense for the type of investing that I do is if this is a $10 billion company. And what you're presented with is the opportunity to sell your company for $500 million. So we have a misalignment. So as long as you're aligned with the style of investor and what their fund strategy is and so on, that can totally make sense. And so a small, $25 million seed fund, if they give you $500,000 or $1 million, and you sell for $500 million, that might return the fund for that fund. And so that's totally great. So you just have to be really smart about who you take money from and make sure that's aligned. The second thing I'll note is I think the markets have changed a lot in the last 20 years, which is there are now opportunities for people to do secondary opportunities and go from this like scarcity mindset into this generational mindset. And I think that's actually really good and really healthy. There are a lot of investors that would disagree with me, but I think founders, if your company is worth 200 million, 300 million, 400 million, I think getting like 2 million out changes the math. All of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, like I can buy a condo in SF and like pay for healthcare and like my future kids will be okay, right? And nobody's going to be like on the street. And it just removes a lot of that stress. And now you sort of shift into this other mode. So the market has in some sense solved this problem by letting people do secondaries. And so I'm a huge fan of like founders actually relatively quickly in the journey doing secondary, because what it's really doing is aligning incentives with the investors long-term. Yeah. Which is now, if you've gotten 2 out, why would you sell the company right now? Like, let's go make something big.
Hey, thank you so much for watching the show. If you're enjoying it, please share it with a friend and subscribe to the show. This is exactly what helps me grow it. And I'm so grateful to be able to do this. Let's get back to the episode. You've written that compound interest applies to people, that the quality of people around you compounds exponentially. I'm curious, who compounded your trajectory?
Far too many people to count is the short answer. I think, and these things sort of build on each other. And so it's just, I feel very fortunate to have, I was born in this country. So I feel very fortunate to have been able to come here, go to great public schools. And we talked about this before. It's just like, it's not uniformly available in all public schools, but I was really fortunate for the places that I went to that there were teachers that sort of said, oh, you seem to be able to do certain things. Like maybe we should get you tested and see if there's actually opportunities that you should be taking advantage of. And so, everything from the teacher in elementary school that said, hey, let's figure out what you're good at and got me tested. And then turns out, guys were really good at math and some other things. And so, she worked to get a special bus where I could go to the high school in the morning. There would be a bus waiting for me, and then the bus would bring you back to the elementary school midday.
So you were taking high school classes while you were still at elementary.
Yeah, but it's just, like a random teacher that was like, hey, we should do something for this kid. Curtis, who's been my friend since I was 18. and taught me so much just as a technologist. Obviously, he's a phenomenal engineer, but also as a human. To all the early lessons from Google and having access to Larry and Sergey and Eric and Marcel Meyer and all the there's names that people know now, but back then Sundar and Brad, Nick Fox, and all these people that I got to learn from were just people who worked at the company. Same thing with Facebook, is just the talent concentration is so ridiculous, and so all these great people to learn from, all the way to when we started our investing, just being able to have access to people like Elad Gil, who you could walk through Silicon Valley, and there's hundreds of people that would tell you stories about how Elad's changed their trajectory. But he's taught us so much. We wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it weren't for his help.
What did he do specifically?
Oh, he helped us co-create this. I mean, he actually owns the domain. He'd been thinking about back in like 17. There were a bunch of people trying to figure out Bitcoin and Ethereum and what's going to happen on chain. And so Elad spotted this opportunity, and he knew Curtis and I had sort of poked around with this stuff from the cryptography side and the distributed system side and privacy technology, because those are all things we care about. And so he approached us and said, "Hey, have you guys thought about putting some structure around all the stuff that you're doing? The angel investing and the cryptography work and the privacy work, and you guys know how to build software. And it seems like there was an opportunity here." And so he catalyzed it all, and then was instrumental in us actually raising that first fund that we did in 2018. Like literally, he flew to New York with me to go pitch LPs and like gave us feedback on the pitch and helped us iterate on the deck, and like instrumental. Like we wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it weren't for his help. But he's done that. He's done that for hundreds of people.
That's amazing.
Yeah. That's why people love him. And all the way to, I was very fortunate to be at YC. And I never went through as a founder, but I was fortunate to go through as a visiting partner in 17, 18. And that was a phenomenal experience, right? Like getting to interact with Daniel Gross and Sam Altman and Michael Siebel, and seeing Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston come back, and how they interact with the founders. And a lot of these things there's some explicit nature to the compounding, where somebody like Elad comes in and takes you under their wing and just teaches you directly, and is a great friend and a mentor. And then some of it is just back to this idea of like opportunity as a luxury. It's just being able to be in the same room as some of these people and see how they work and how they operate and how they think. Sometimes that's enough, right? Sometimes all of a sudden that sort of like makes that thing click in your head. I'll give you an example. Like, when I went to demo day, the thing I didn't, I think, fully appreciate until I saw it, was how Paul and Jessica at YC interact with the founders.
How do they interact with founders?
They just have such a deep reverence for what it means to be a founder, and like a genuine love for these people. And so, it's like Jessica will stand off stage, and like when you come off, she's just like beaming, and she just makes you feel so good that you did it, right? Like it's like such a stressful thing, and then gives you a big hug. And yeah, I don't know how to describe it other than just sort of like they have like a deep reverence and love for these people, and it just comes across. It's like this intangible thing that you can kind of just like feel.
Do you know who's doing that now at YC?
Well, I think it's still partly them. But I think Gary has that too, like having been a founder. And I think most of the partners there now are former YC founders, so they have like a deep empathy for that. And I think that was really smart on their part to sort of enforce that. We're the same way. I think about 40% of Electric is former founders, and that's by design. But that like little bit of insight of like, oh, I get why this place took off the way that you needed the product market fit, you needed all that, but it's like, it's just an embodiment of who they are. They're not thinking of this. Obviously they want to make a ton of money, and they're business people, and they're venture capitalists, right? But
well, it goes back to your point about authenticity and expressing yourself in the world.
100%. It's just so authentic for them. They just like have a genuine love for these people. And a genuine curiosity. And it's like, I have this really striking memory of YC does these weekly dinners with former founders that have been successful. So Brian Chesky or Brian Armstrong will come in, or whoever. And Paul and Jessica are extremely successful. They're literal billionaires. They could be, off on a beach somewhere. But they're like sitting in the middle of the room, like listening to this talk from this person that effectively it's like a teacher student kind of relationship is how it starts. But then these founders go off to be very, very successful. And then they come back, and Paul and Jessica will be sitting in the middle of the room, like intently listening to the lessons from this founder. And we'll ask a question, and you're like, wow, they're just like genuinely curious. This is just who they are. And so I kind of like seeing that, the light bulb went off. It's like, oh, I kind of see why this thing works. And I think it's just like so much of it just comes down in so many of these products. I think in so many of these companies, it's just like, they just care so much. I don't know who said it, but it's that story of like the furniture maker that sands the like inside back of the drawer
that no one technically cares about.
Yeah. Nobody can see it, but like, they can see it. And it's just like that little extra bit of care where you just care enough, but you care so much more than everybody else, but you have to care that much. When you see it, you're like, oh, I get it. Right. So, that's a form of compounding where you sort of have this little light bulb go off when you see these people and you have access to them. And you can see how they operate, even if they don't realize it. And then that just builds, right? And so every time that happens, it just sort of compounds and compounds. And then I think what's great about Silicon Valley is, this place is a tight, small group of people in the grand scheme of things. And so information flows very quickly about who's real, who's creating value. And one of the really interesting properties about technology, I think, is that the time from being a nobody to being somebody is very short. Like in 4 years, you can go from, Anthropic not being able to raise a round to, oh my gosh, this is going to be $1 trillion company. And so what that means is, practically speaking, any person you meet at a house party might be the next Dario. And that enforces good behavior in a certain way. But that also means that if you actually genuinely create value for people, odds are you've created value for people who will go off and do interesting things in the world. And so it has this way of coming back to you and compounding. And so it sort of enforces really good behavior. And so, the compounding, I think it's sort of like inward in terms of like, these people make you better. But what's really great about the structure of how Silicon Valley works is like the way you really compound it is you like sort of pay it forward, and it has a way of kind of coming back to you because the community is so small and the networks are so tight.
What were the specific things that you learned from your time as a visiting YC partner from other partners or Paul and Jessica that you really wanted to make sure you model after at Electric?
Yeah, well, there were a couple. I mean, the reverence for founders thing, I think is a really big one. I mean, our first value, everyone here will tell you, is founders come first. Because I think if you basically just do the right thing for the founders, everything else takes care of itself.
Can you give me some examples with how that specifically could show up or has shown up?
Yeah, totally. I think it's, like we are strong advocates of founders retaining control of the company, because I think in the long term, founders running things is better because they have moral authority. And so they can make very hard decisions. You can go into a local maximum and you can break out of that because the founder says we're going to break out of it. I'm a huge fan of founders getting liquidity.
So like secondaries, what we talked about.
And uncomfortably early in a lot of cases. And I think
how early?
Like Series B. You have to have something, but I think like unlocking the thing if it's working and the founder being a big unlock, I think is important.
I feel like Series B is not that contrarian early because in the last few years, there's been a lot of Series A secondaries.
I think, it's a big change from like 15 years ago. Series A, I think it can work if it's the right person. And it's case by case. The problem is you can create perverse incentives. So you have to be a little careful in how you do it. But I think that's sort of that realization that like the whole thing works if you have a deep reverence for the founder. Like that's your customer, that's the person that you need to optimize for. And these things are not one shot, right? It's anybody can go look up the history of like Parker and Zenefits and Rippling. And Rippling is the $20 billion company, not Zenefits, right? And YC understands that. And so they backed Parker unconditionally, right? And that was the right call, including the sort of specific circumstances of that particular case. But intuitively, they understand that backing the founder is the thing that you're doing. And so it may not even be the first company. It may be the second company, the second time around that it happens. And all these things, they're sort of, hey, it's good to be good. Like that's sort of intuitively makes sense. But I think people don't fully appreciate that the reason these things persist, the reason YC is successful is because there are real market forces at work here. So like, why is that the right thing to do? Well, one is that the timeline from being a nobody to being somebody is very short. And so that's a thing. There's the power law nature of venture, which is that one company, if it's worth $100 billion, that's the only thing that mattered, right? Like nothing else mattered, because your return on that pays 10-fold what you put in for everything else. And so if you think that somebody is capable of doing that, then like you should just give them more money.
Double down,
right? If you think that the only things that matter are the things that can be worth more than 50 or $100 billion, and in those cases, it's that much more important that the founder retains control of the thing for the long term, then of course you would do certain things. So you can actually, from like the properties of how startups work, you would back into, oh, these are actually the right principles, which is why I think over time you've seen venture capital move in that direction. Like VCs 20 years ago were very different than early stage VCs have to be today, but it's because the reality of the market sort of pushed it in a certain direction.
So 2017, 2018, you were a visiting partner at YC. Seems like it was amazing. Mm-hmm. People were incredible. You learned a lot. Yeah. Why not stay there longer or get a full-time role to be a partner at YC and start your own thing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's unclear that they would hire me because I didn't go through YC, right? And so it's, maybe it made sense, maybe it doesn't. I'm very fond of that place. My wife has been through 3 times.
3 times?
Yeah.
Wow. Is that how you guys met?
No, we met through Stanford friends, but
got it.
So we benefited
fondness.
We have tremendous fondness for that whole ecosystem, and Paul and Jessica have been very, very good to my wife. So we have a deep sort of fondness for that. But I think also at the end of the day, it's I think I have the desire to create my own thing and create my own space, and so this probably wouldn't have been the right fit for me. Again, setting aside whether or not they would have had me. But for me, it's just, I think for me, the act of creating something from scratch, there's something gratifying about that. And I think it makes me a better investor too, because for the person on the other side of it, they know that the person that they're interacting with is themselves a founder. So they like a lot of the people we've invested in over the last 5 years, have seen us grow up as a startup. So I would say we're kind of like a Series B company, which is like we have a thing, it's working, we're trying to figure out how to scale it. That's kind of where we are in our evolution.
Which is something that we'll talk about.
Yeah. And so, I think for a lot of founders, they can kind of tell that the people on the other side are also building something. And that's very deliberate. But I think that actually makes us better investors.
So Curtis and you have these friend therapy sessions, and you introspect in and trying to figure out what you love and what you're good at. You figure out that through all your angel investing, there is this great track record. Mm-hmm. And it sounded like the track record is in a bunch of industries across the board. It wasn't necessarily just crypto. Yeah. Why did you decide to start back then a crypto fund?
Yeah. The observation was, it was startup thinking, right? It was, okay,
like an inflection point.
Yeah. So how do startups generally have to start in order to be successful? What you have to do is you have to pick a beachhead. You have to pick a thing that the incumbents, for some reason, are not capable of doing. Land there, and the bet that you're taking is that market is going to be enormous, that people are underestimating how big that market's going to be, and that the advantages that you accrue in that beachhead market will allow you to then go compete against the incumbents, and you'll back into the incumbents market. This is sort of the classic adage of, startups are trying to figure out distribution while the incumbents are trying to figure out innovation. And that's the race that you're in. And so our bet was this, as a beachhead market, would be a thing that the legacy firms, other than basically Andreessen, would not pursue. But would be a huge market. And so if we could land there, we could build the business, we could build access, we could build tooling, then we would have a shot at backing into all frontier investments over time. But, just showing up and saying, hey, I'm yet another one of the 1,000 seed investors. It's a very, very crowded space. It's a difficult thing to break through. This was a beachhead that we could do that with. The other sort of belief that we had specifically about that market, because we spent a lot of time thinking about privacy technologies or cryptography, was that what had happened circa 2016 with Ethereum was a new platform had been created, and that all of fintech and financial services would move to this new platform.
And you've been a beneficiary of new platform creations over the years by then. Yeah.
Social and mobile,
Yeah.
the internet. And so we said, I think this is a new platform. And anytime there's a new platform, you see a new generation of companies come in. And our belief was that these crypto technologies would, really what they were was software eating money, to use an interesting turn of phrase. And so if this was really programmable money, that was the thesis that we wrote in 2017, we called it programmable money, that you had these stores of value that were emerging, these digital stores of value. On top of that, you get stable coins, and that was a way for money to flow around. But if you got the stable coins on these things, then you would have capital markets that came on here. And so, stocks and bonds and private credit, all of these things would move on chain. But that venture capital would have to as well. And there's no reason that venture capital as a sort of from an operational perspective, it's just capital deployment. So there's no reason that couldn't also move on chain. And anytime you see a platform where software is then eating that industry, there's this corollary that happens, which is that the companies that win tend to be run by software engineers. And it's because all of your critical levers in running the business become software enabled, right? So let's take an example. Let's take something like Amazon versus Walmart, e-commerce. All of the critical levers in e-commerce have to be run by software, like how you acquire your customers, how you track the funnel, how you track where your packages are, like everything becomes digitized. And so what you have to do is empower the software engineers to make all these decisions. You have to create an A/B testing framework on your website. You have to create an automated advertising funnel to buy ads and track all these things. And what that does to the organization is that you have to set up an organization where, well, the people who are making the critical decisions in your company have to be the ones that have all the power and make all the money. So at Amazon, software engineers make all the decisions and they make all the money. The partnerships people don't. That's basically the inverse of what happens at Walmart. Like, in a legacy retail business, the person who has a deep understanding of in-store shelf pricing and how the stores are laid out, and how the relationship with Procter and Gamble, like these things are all the points of leverage, right? And so Walmart for years and years, it's a little different today, but for years and years, always just had tier 2 engineers, and they were just never going to be able to hire those people. And so Amazon wins. Walmart 25 years later is still trying to figure it out. Now they're making a lot of headway, but it took them 25 years, right? This is the writing's been on the wall for a long time. And so why weren't they able to do it? The reason they weren't able to do it is because what you really have to have, back to this idea of founders having moral authority, like Sam Walton would have made it happen. He would have blown up the organization and made it happen. But what you have to do if you're a professional CEO is you actually have to go into the organization and say, all right, all of you people over here, you're now fired. All of you people over here, you now make half the money. All of you people, you make twice the money. And by the way, you might not be the right people to do this, so we might replace you, but now we're going to pay all the engineers twice as much so we can get good engineers. And if you look at like the org chart, right? Somebody like Sheryl Sandberg reports to Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. In most companies, Sheryl would have been the CEO and Mark would have been like the chief product officer, right? So literally like the org chart, you have to like bend the org chart tree and put a different person in as CEO. And so is the CEO of Walmart going to go in and say like, no, I'm demoting myself to COO and like that person is now my boss? That's like a weird, right? So like all of those human things end up being the hard part, not the software. Like Walmart can put up a website. They've had a website for a long time. They have actually an amazing logistics network. So like the software part of it is easy. The technology part of it is easy relative to the human part. And so it's much easier. And you see the same thing with like Tesla. You see the same thing with, the media companies. So it's like Facebook or YouTube versus the legacy media companies. And even if you look in media, you see, for example, the New York Times manages to pull that off and survive and is now thriving. It's because it's effectively founder owned, right? It's the same family has run it. And so they can blow it up and reboot for the modern world. Whereas like the Chicago Tribune or the LA Times or the Seattle Times or whatever, they're gone. That's not going to happen.
Do you think that power dynamic will shift now, though, coming back to the beginning of our conversation where we identified that human relationships will be at the core of things in the world of AI, or will it stay the same where software engineers will be empowered? People who build will be more empowered?
I think they'll be more empowered. And I think the role of the founder becomes even more important. because who you're working with and who you're working for and what you're working on start to matter even more. When you can work, when software becomes commoditized, like those things matter more. I'll give you an example. I think a lot of software businesses, not all, a lot of software businesses start to look a lot more like direct to consumer businesses. And so the branding and the marketing and what are you trying to say in the world, the culture of the place, all of these human things start to matter a lot more, which I think is actually empowers the founder even more. Because that's what founders tend to be good at. And at scale, like you're not writing the code anyway. It's not like the founder's writing the code. What's the founder doing? They're dictating culture and they're dictating what the hiring processes are and what the brand is and how you say what you're trying to say and how you reach customers and coordinate all of this. And so I think it actually empowers certain kinds of people even more. Now, historically, if you look at any time there's been breakthroughs or improvements in technology, there's a pattern that you tend to see, which is that people who can go one or two levels deeper in the stack tend to have all the advantages. And so what does that mean? Let's say you're a designer, like a product designer. A lot of the best designers have a very good understanding of how front-end engineering works. Like they have an intuition for JavaScript and CSS, and they probably write those things, or React. And the really, really good ones also often understand how the API layer between the front end and the back end interfaces. And so they can optimize the front end with those constraints, or they understand why certain things are possible, or they understand how to architect things such that the front end can do certain things. And you see that pattern over and over, right? Like the best backend engineers understand how the APIs are set up and how the infrastructure is set up and how like data centers are built. Or like the data center engineers like understand how the chips are built and like, all the way down how cooling works, right? And so like the ability to go deeper in the stack and understand how these things fit and what the constraints are that you're working under, or when a new technology comes in, how to adopt that. All of those things are what then give you leverage and insight and what to do with the tooling. So I actually think understanding computer science and software and being able to write good code doesn't mean that you're now writing the code, but it means it gives you a deeper understanding of what's happening below you in the stack. And then a different set of skills start to matter, right? So it's sort of, like a designer is different than
like an orchestration.
Exactly. So it's like, can you communicate? Can you orchestrate? Can you like define the problem in the right way? Do you know how to do the right prompts? Do you know how to like, break things into sub-agent tasks? Like all of these other skills start to matter. But it doesn't mean that the computer science mattered less. It just means that the point of leverage changed. But actually, the computer science is still a like critical point of understanding and leverage.
So now coming back to Electric and the founding story. So you're saying that crypto was the wedge.
Yeah.
Has that always been the case? Like you started with crypto because you always knew that you were going to expand to other industries, or has that shifted over the last few years?
Yeah, that was always the plan. That's why we named it Electric instead of...
Yeah, who came up with the name? Was it Elad Gil because he had the domain?
Well, he had the domain, but that was sort of happening in parallel. We were brainstorming a bunch of names.
Why did he have the domain?
Elad is actually surprisingly good at branding. He also named color, color genomics, and he's actually very good at naming. And so he had like 5 or 6 names he was kicking around. We had some names we were kicking around, and we sort of intersected. And then he went and checked the domain and was actually available, so he bought it.
Oh, got it.
But
so he's not like a domain hoarder. He has like 500 domains.
I don't think he might. But he's very good at branding. We were having these conversations about names, and there were 5 or 6 we were considering. I don't even remember most of them, but the Electric one, sort of as we were brainstorming, came out and stuck with us for a couple of reasons. One, we thought this technology, the programmable money stack, was kind of like electricity. It would just power everything, and it would just disappear one day. You wouldn't even notice it. 2, it was a nod to Electrum. Electrum was the first coined money in the Lydian Empire. So it was a coinage of silver and gold, an alloy. And the reason that's important is that technology is like, before that you had to weigh your gold. So you like chuck it, take a chunk of it and like have a scale and stuff. So having standard denominated coinage, was a technical breakthrough. And that's what we thought this is like a money technology. So it's a nod to Electrum, the first technology. And then we thought it was sufficiently brandable. Like it was an open generic name that one day when we're doing all these other things, would work. And so it wasn't like block something or coin something where we would sort of be narrowly in that lane forever, and then you have to rebrand at some point. And so, yeah, we were pretty deliberate about that from the very beginning.
Our mutual friend Hasib told me that you have this feeling of inevitability about crypto, that every time the market is down, he's like, oh shit, the market's down. And then you were like, great.
Yeah.
We'll become more rich, buying more.
That's right. Yeah. I think it's like, I get nervous in bull markets, like AI stuff is in this bull market right now, and it makes me nervous. Because it's too easy to get over your skis. It's too easy to drink the Kool-Aid. It's too easy to like believe your own hype. And that just makes investing harder, right? And so it's a little bit of laziness, which is like, if you have some fundamental view and the technology, shows that it's the case, it's almost like theoretical physics or something. It's like, you can look at these things and you can like run a model and you're like, hey, look, the math kind of works out. And it might take 20 years, but like the math eventually points you to a conclusion, and you're like, yeah, there's a Higgs, right? Like we understand it. And I kind of think a lot of technologies and markets are like that. That's not to say they're inevitable the way physics models are, but you can develop enough conviction that you can say, I think eventually this is what happens. And once you find one of those things, like actually the best thing to do is just like buy and right. This goes back to other sort of biases I think humans have, which is like, we don't really understand, so back to the idea of human brains. We have these goofy biases. We don't understand large numbers. Like if I show you this, you're like, oh, that's 5. If I show you a pile of bananas, you're like, I don't know, is that 30? Is that 40? Is that 50? And if I show you a really big pile of bananas, is it 100 or 200? So our brains are not set up for millions and billions. We don't really understand exponential growth, right? So it's not like you go to sleep one day and then you wake up and outside your tree, there's, outside your window, there's a giant tree that wasn't there before. That doesn't happen in macrobiology. It happens in microbiology, but it doesn't happen in macro, which is why like most humans didn't understand what was happening with COVID, because it was an exponential curve. And we don't understand low probability events. So people are scared of getting struck by lightning or dying in a plane crash. And they're not scared of riding in a car.
Riding in a car, yeah.
And you're like, this, if you just look at the numbers, you're like, this is totally backwards, right? But our intuitions about how likely things are actually, especially with very small probability events, are totally wrong. So you take these 3 things, like we don't understand large numbers, we don't understand exponential growth, and we don't understand low probability events, and that's startups, right? And so our intuitions about startups are totally messed up. Like it's very hard to intuit these things. But one of those things that you sort of learn, which doesn't match intuition, is that when a thing works, it likely continues to work. And so if like 50 million people do a thing, probably 1 billion people are going to do that thing. If there's what you've really got from that 50 million people is that there's some signal there's some problem being solved. And so, by the time Facebook had 50 million or 100 million people, there's a very reasonable.
It was inevitable.
It's going to have 1 billion people. And even if you don't think it's that particular product, probably that category, by the time there's 50 or 100 million people doing social networking between MySpace and Facebook, you're like, this is a thing. And probably 1 billion people are going to do it. Same thing with mobile, same thing with PCs, same thing with the internet. And so now people have started to learn that you can make these projections going forward, and the projections really should be exponential. Which again, it breaks your intuition, right? That's not how because when you say these things, it sounds ridiculous. And if you look at the history of technology, you could stand in like 1985, you could stand in 1990, you could stand in 1995, 2000, pick like any date. And imagine you're standing on this curve, right? The growth of whatever that industry is. And if you sort of like looked behind you, you would see that it was exponential, right? You'd be like, oh yeah, for the last 10 years, it's basically been exponential. And if you looked forward, you don't know what the curve is yet. And if you extrapolate exponentially, you just sound like a crazy person, right? You're like, really? Like, we're just going to, like, 100% of cars are going to be electric, and we're just going to have solar panels everywhere. And, like, these things, there's that infamous, I think it was like a McKinsey report that predicted how many, like, Teslas would get sold, and they were just off by 100x, and it's because, like, you can't make projections, because if you make these projections going forward, you sound like a crazy person, exponentially, right? Really? Like, OpenAI is going to be $1 trillion company, Yeah, like,
who would have thought?
Yeah, these things sound crazy, but it's turned out that those are usually right in technology. And so, I think I look at market corrections in practically any industry as an opportunity, because what the market feels versus what's real have disconnected. And so if you can find those things that are like, Facebook in 2008, and the market is crashing and everything's going to hell, but the thing is really working and you have amazing people behind it, and there's a real problem being solved, that's the thing that you go put a bunch of money into and you just hang on for 10 years. And I think every industry has those. And so, yeah, I mean, I look at something like Bitcoin or Ethereum and I'm like, it's sort of crossed that point. It's just, it's sort of inevitable. And maybe it takes 10 years instead of 7. And that impacts you have to be smart about rates of return and opportunity cost of capital and all that kind of stuff. But, the lower prices go, the easier that is to make work, right? It's like the easier it is that you're actually going to get the compounding that you need to make the returns work. So I actually prefer it when that happens.
Do you have any examples when you had super strong conviction and you were wrong?
Yeah, I mean, for short answer is yes, many. And a lot of it has been sort of, 2 categories, I think. One is where the technology, is basically correct and inevitable. But it takes the market a while to realize that. And so you're sort of patiently waiting for that to happen. Another is that...
What's an example?
Self-driving cars, I think is a good example.
But you weren't necessarily wrong here because clearly we're rolling out more of them.
Yeah, we were seed investors in Cruise, and that was acquired by GM and was very successful before it was shut down. But I think we sort of misjudged the regulatory pushback that you would get and how hard it would be to roll these things out, across the country, and the complexities there. So, being too early is the same as being wrong, as they say. I think another category of failure is where the technology and even the technologists that are making it are basically correct, but the set of skills that you need to really break through to make that thing work at scale with the markets are require a different set of skills. And so the founder is not able to make that transition into that other role that is necessary for them. And so they're a phenomenal technologist, but they're not necessarily a great CEO.
What's an example?
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but that happens a lot. There are a lot of things where the technologist is not able to make that happen.
Or they're maybe too academic.
Correct. Yeah. And so then it's like the technology has progressed to a certain point and somebody else can pick up the technology and run with it. And then the person who picks up the technology after it's been progressed to a certain stage is the one who can take it to market. And so it's sort of like a lot of, I kind of feel like a lot of stuff directionally is, if you're close to the information flow, if you're close to really good people, you can sort of call. And then it's like, well, are you correct on the timing? And are the specific bets that you're taking the right ones? And that's much harder. But yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, most startups fail, right? And most startups inside a portfolio even don't work to the degree that you would want them to work, for various reasons. So yeah, I mean, as a VC, you get used to being specifically wrong all the time. So you're like generally correct and specifically wrong all the time.
How do you check your own convictions?
You have to have really good people around you. You have to have, I think one of the things that we've done a good job of is a lot of the people that we work with are people that we've worked with for a long time. And so,
like a lot of people internally or a lot of people externally or both? Okay.
Both, yeah. And so what that does is it creates an environment where there's a lot of trust that's been built up over a long time, like 5, 10, 15, 20 years in some cases. And so that makes it really easy to disagree because you know that the person is not doing it for their own ego or for their own sake or whatever. They genuinely are trying to be helpful. And so I think the best hack I've found is find people that are willing to disagree with you and very smart and first principles thinkers. And then just surround yourself with as many of them as you can and then stay friendly with them and close with them for as long as you can. Because actually the ability to disagree with you is also a function of the familiarity of the person with you. Like most people, I mean, set aside like Peter Thiel or something, most people are not going to just like disagree with you outright. There's sort of like a human dance that has to happen there. And the way that you get through that is you actually develop friendships with people and then they trust you and then, they don't mind disagreeing with you because then you're like actually trying to help each other. You're trying to like figure out what's real. It's like, as you mentioned Haseeb. Haseeb's a great example of this, right? Like Haseeb and I can disagree about all sorts of stuff. And actually I like disagreeing with him. He's opinionated, he's thoughtful. And then we can kind of like hash it out, right? And so you just have to surround yourself with a bunch of people like that. But I think the secret unlock is actually like a group of people that has spent enough time together to feel comfortable disagreeing with each other.
Yeah, the other day I was interviewing Toli from Solana, and he was like, him and his co-founder just disagree until they hash every single possibility out, and then they come to a decision and a conclusion of how they should actually act. And that trust disagreeing is a very special thing that you can have with someone.
That's right. Yeah, Curtis and I like that too. Like LPs often ask us, like, how do you guys figure it out if you like don't agree? I'm like, well, we just like talk about it until
we just disagree
we just disagree until like somebody like is right. And it's because if you're rational and you're smart and you're thoughtful, you can have that. You're like, wait, why do we disagree? There's either some assumption that's different, or there's some data that we have that's different, or there's some reasoning that we're doing. So like, so let's talk through that. And you're like, oh yeah, you're totally right. That's not the right way to think about it. And then you don't disagree anymore. But I think having those kinds of people around you is a real benefit. But I don't think there's any way to fake it other than like you just have to do that with people for a while, and then you figure out who you do that best with. I think that's one of the really great things also about founders and Silicon Valley is like there's a lot of people looking for that, right? So it's not like Asiva and I have known each other for 20 years and grew up together or something. But when you find somebody like that, you're like, oh, you like we're the same type of person, right? And so then that's sort of like you click with that person, and then
you have an opportunity to disagree more.
Just compounds it quickly. Yeah, like literally in like a couple of conversations, you're like, oh, you're one of my people, right? Like you get it really fast. But I think this ecosystem is full of those kinds of people, which is really awesome.
So when you were starting Electric with Curtis, who were the firms and people that you were trying to model after and you really looked up to?
Yeah.
Outside, I guess, of Elad Gil, because he was already at the beginning of that journey with you.
Yeah, Elad's a unicorn. He's a one of one. But yeah, definitely Elad. There are actually four that we've thought about very specifically. One was Y Combinator, so Paul Graham and Jessica, and one was Peter Thiel and Founders Fund. One was Mark Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz, and then one was Reid Hoffman. And what we liked about Reid, we thought was really interesting, is he didn't put himself in a box. So he didn't say, "Hey, I'm a founder," or "I'm an investor." He just sort of says, "I have access to people, I have access to capital, I have access to information. Let me blend these together in some way to create value in the world." He's very good at that. What we really liked about Peter was Peter also does that. He's just sort of doesn't exist in a box. He's down to do whatever. Very creative. But he is, he's willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time, and be okay with it. And I really respect that. He's not chasing anybody's approval. What I think, Mark, and Ben got right, and Andreessen, was the recognition that the founder is an artist. And what you need to do is build a framework around that. And what I think Paul and Jessica got right is that sort of like primacy and fundamental reverence for the founder and everything else flowing from that. And so,
And what about Elad?
Yeah, I think Elad does a lot of things right. The two or three that I think I've learned the most from him: one, he's phenomenal at selecting markets. So his intuition and his reasoning around this thing is going to tip at the right time, phenomenal. Two is, I think he's just the most helpful. And so he has an intuition for, this is what this company needs, this is what this founder needs, and I'm going to get it done for them. And so his ability to actually deliver value is unlike anybody else, which is why he's so successful. And those two things I think I've sort of learned from him, and modeled a lot of what we do. So yeah, it's basically these five groups. And so what we aspire to be is sort of somewhere in the middle. Now there's a separate one, which is, it's I usually don't say it, and I don't like to say it because it's sort of like a cheap one, because I think the other ones are maybe people may not think about, but and it's hard to model yourself on it. But I think Sequoia, obviously, in venture capital, and so I've read everything Don Valentine's ever done, or the interviews, or videos he's done, and they also really nail markets, obviously, in picking markets, and that sort of like strive for excellence, and good is not good enough. There's just like, and the durability of what they built is remarkable, but it's hard to model yourself on that in the sense of like that's down. There's a bunch of things that they do. But really it's like the thing that they built is the admirable thing. And sort of the brand that they built around that. I think it's a remarkable thing. But it's hard to copy that exactly. So there's a bunch of the ones we talk about, and there's a bunch of others. I mean, I think, like I said, like there's artists and musicians and Rick Rubin. I think like, yeah, there's a lot. Vinod Khosla is a really interesting one. Vinod has a lot of these properties too. Like when I was doing the YC thing, we'd be at demo day, and it used to be at the Computer History Museum, and demo day happened. There's sort of this like reception after all the pitches were done, and you have cocktails and you have some like snacks in this room, and I think if I remember, it started like around 5, and basically everybody would clear out except for me and Vinod and this like group of founders that wanted to talk to him at like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and literally the janitorial staff would have like cleaned everything up, like vacuumed, and be shutting out the lights and being like, "Hey, you guys need to leave. Like we're closing the doors." And Vinod would still be there, right? And he didn't have to be. He's a multi-billionaire. He just loves hanging out with founders. That's just what he loves to do. And that's a very like Paul and Jessica type of a thing. It's just like he's just doing it for the love of the game, right? And he just loves it. He just loves being around people building cool stuff. So all these other sort of one-off influences as well, but sort of from a like deep relationship connectivity, like direct access kind of perspective, I think it's those handful of people I mentioned.
So from the things that you've mentioned, there was 6, 7, reverence for the founders, excellence, durability, not putting yourself in a box, being okay with being with people disagreeing with you, being incredibly valuable. What are the things or qualities, characteristics that you think you're still struggling with, if any?
Well, the one way I would sort of talk about not being put in a box or some of those other things is actually the way we talk about it internally is honesty, which is you really, really, really have to learn to be honest. And you have to learn to be honest with yourself, and you have to learn to be honest with other people. And you have to also understand that most of the world is not honest. Most of the world is actually dishonest. And it's not.
Oh, you actually think so?
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think that?
Because I don't think.
Do you think that's the same as thinking that people are fundamentally good or bad, or is it a completely different property?
It's a different thing. Yeah, it's not a moral sort of aspiration, like assertion. It's sort of an observation, which is downstream of it's just human psychology, right? So most people don't want to say the uncomfortable truth. Many people are put into situations where if they say the true thing, it has negative blowback on them. So,
or they think it has negative blowback, but in reality, probably doesn't as much.
Sometimes. I'll give you a really concrete example, right? If you have a business, a small business or a startup or whatever, you might have to work with an outside tax and accounting firm. And the person who is on the sales team has an incentive to try to convince you to work with them. And so they'll commit. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, we can totally do this. Like, we're going to do a better job. Here's the rate, whatever." And then the person who's actually doing the accounting work, the actual accountant, the company that they work for may have booked too many clients. And the reality is they're just not going to be able to do it. But now they're a hardworking person. They're willing to work weekends. They're willing to work nights. And if they acknowledge to you too early in the process that there's no way they're going to get your taxes done,
yeah, they might lose you.
The business is going to lose you. But B, they just made it appear as that the salesperson lied to you, right? Like, why did you tell me you could do it if like the person who's doing the work is telling you can't do it? And so now they're in a tough spot where they can't actually tell you the truth. And so what they're going to do is tell you sort of half-truths. And you have to learn to read those half-truths to say, "Oh, what's happening here is you can't tell me the truth. And the reality is we're not going to hit this deadline. There's no way you can get my taxes done in time." But they can't say that, right? And so actually this is hard, I think, especially for honest people, because honest people assume that other people are honest. And it turns out most people aren't. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because admitting the truth is painful, right? It makes you look bad. It makes somebody else look bad. It makes your company look bad. It makes your family look bad, whatever it is. And so they'll hide the truth, but they'll give you signal that they're not 100% telling the truth. And this goes back to this idea of human authenticity. Like, our brains are wired for this. And so if you can hone that skill, you can tell when people are actually telling you the truth. So a lot of these things actually, I think, come down to like, whether you call it first principles thinking or, being contrarian or being willing to be misunderstood or whatever. A lot of that actually just comes down to honesty. If you're just honest and 100% honest, all of those things sort of naturally flow from that.
So is that the thing that you mentioned, that not putting yourself in a box is the thing that you guys might still be struggling with?
No, actually, I think we don't struggle. I don't think we struggle with any of those inputs. I think where we struggle when you one of the properties of our culture actually is we tend to hire engineers, and it's because back to this idea of, I think when your business evolves, and I think venture capital is evolving, you need to acquire your customers in a different way. You need to build brand in a different way. You need to run your business in a different way. So we built a lot of tooling internally, for example, which is using agents to do things that historically humans would have done.
What are some examples?
Oh, we have Ken on our team has built an entire system called Quest, which has access to our CRM, which has access to our accounting and our founder data, and so we can just ask it questions. We can have it double check finances. We can have it draft documents, and it has all of that context inside the company. And so now we don't hire analysts. We don't hire like a junior VC
And have
person.
you started building those tools since the AI inflection point, or was that?
Yeah, it's mostly in the last like 2.5 years. But yeah, now we don't need to hire a 22, 24-year-old like junior analyst to do reports. Like we have all the context, we have the history, we have the emails, we have the Slack conversations. And so we can write a memo about a thing in like 20 minutes with deep research plus like this internal tooling that we have. And so, we don't really struggle with most of the things we talked about. The side effect, though, of sort of having people who think in that way is that really, really honest people who tend to focus on creating value for other people, who will do the right thing for founders, all those things, they tend to not be good at talking about the work. They tend to be really good at doing the work, right? So we're like really good at finding founders. We're really good at working with those people. We're like spend all this time and money and energy helping them, and we're generally pretty bad at talking. Which is a side
branding,
effect.
Marketing, yeah.
We're just bad at that. And so that's a skill that we're still, I think, learning to develop. But the way I think about it is like really brands are a proxy for trust. And there are two ways to go about building that brand, especially if you take sort of a direct to consumer lens on this. One is you can make a lot of noise. And then hopefully the value proposition that you have in your product
matches the noise.
Is matched up. Yeah. Or you can just create a really awesome product and then figure out how to sort of get the world and understand. But if it's genuinely an awesome product, then the customers of that product will just start telling people. And that I think is the right and durable way to build brand, and that compounds over time. So that's the approach that we've taken. But that does require figuring out how to talk about your brand and build your brand and do all those things, which is a different thing than building the product.
What makes Electric Capital awesome? What are the specific things that you guys do when it comes to the product that the founders are excited to work with you?
Yeah. Well, I think the first and most important thing is ultimately just this like idea that the founders know we're just going to do the right thing for them. And we do look at it as a very long-term relationship, even across companies. So it's not that like this company needs to work necessarily. It's like there's a journey that we're on now for 10 years with these people, and they'll figure it out. And we would love to be a part of that journey. And then the way we sort of demonstrate that is just by overcommitting resources. And so
like in what way are you guys overcommitting resources?
Oh, we just spend way more time and energy and dollars with our investments than pretty much anybody else that I know at our size.
Can you give me an example maybe of a company and what you did for it?
Yeah. Well, the founder should really speak to this most, but like for example, we'll
invite the founder next time.
Yeah. But it's sort of a like do whatever it takes mentality. And so whether that's like fundraising, whether that's customer calls, whether that's helping literally like edit the deck to do the next round, or, on staff, we have like 5 former executives from Fortune 500 companies that we just have on our payroll. And we can drop them into companies and they'll just go help.
Like they're still working at those Fortune 500 companies?
No, they're full-time with us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're full-time with us. We just pay them and then they just go into the companies to help.
That's cool.
And so, yeah, there's this wonderful woman, Baz, and she used to run HR at WhatsApp and all of people at WhatsApp. And before that, she did Instagram. Before that, she was doing the ads group at Facebook. And so Mark would drop her into these places where you had a special, unique thing, a culture, and you didn't want to blow up the culture. but you needed to get recruiting and hiring and HR practices and make the organization work. And so she was a phenomenal partner to a bunch of executives. And she's worked with several like very, very well-known like pre-IPO companies as an advisor, because the people that used to report to her are now running HR, and people had a bunch of these like, future $100 billion companies. And so she's gone into 2 or 3, I'm purposely being vague on the names, for the companies she's worked with and the companies she's working with now, because that's their call if they want to disclose that. But she's working with 2 breakout companies right now, and literally yesterday, one of the CEO and founder of one of those companies just texted me, like, Baz is amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
But she's basically going in and she's worked with, in the last 6 months, she's worked with 3 different companies, and basically gone in and either been their head of people for a few months and helped them hire the person, or worked with that person really closely. And essentially she's literally at a company right now 3 days a week, and she just goes into their office and does whatever they need. And so if you look at like as like a business, I think most people may not realize this, but Curtis and I are the lowest paid people at Electric. We make less in cash comp than everybody else. And it's because we take all the dollars that typically like a general partner would make, in like, cash flow.
Invest it into the founders.
Yeah. We just turn around and like go hire people like Baz or Eric or Elizabeth. And we just think that's from like an investment perspective, that's the right long-term thing to do, because we're going to make all the money on the carry and the way the firm sort of grows and evolves. But I think that's an example of the thing. And I could, we do founder summits and we have dinners and we have all these things that a lot of VC firms do, but it kind of goes back to this idea of like, some of these things I think you can systematize. But a lot of it is just, you just have to care more than anybody else. And if it turns out you just care more than anybody else, the person on the other side can kind of sense that. And it just comes out. I think that's like the beauty of creating something, is like, that's what you're trying to convey to the customer. Is if you're trying to build that kind of a product. Now, there's other kinds of products that you can, like mass market, mass production, like there are different ways to build products. But for the type of product that we're trying to create here, what the customer, in this case, the founder, should feel when interacting with that product is this sense of, oh, the people that created this product just cared more than makes sense to care, right? They just cared so much more than anybody else has chosen to care. If you get that right, then there's this sort of like immediate affiliation and brand love, and sort of like that just happens naturally. But I think it has to come from the person.
From within.
Yeah, they have to feel it. They have to sort of like understand that this person, the people who created this product, just cared. And they cared so much more than anybody else has ever cared.
Do you think there's 2 buckets of people who care and people who don't care, or can you learn how to care?
I don't think you can learn how to care about a specific thing. Like, I think everybody cares about something.
So just finding the thing that you uniquely is positioned to care about.
Yeah, that's right. Which I mean, that is like the founder exercise, right? It's like, that's one of the questions we ask founders is, well, why do you care about it? Yeah, like, why, of all of the things, you're clearly a talented person, like, of all of the things you could do in the world, why are you choosing to do this? And there needs to be a reason. Because if it's a rational thing, then when things get hard, you'll stop, right? Because that ROI calculation in your head kicks in and you're like, this just isn't worth the pain. If you care about something more than rationally makes sense to care about a thing, then when it doesn't make sense, you will keep going. And a lot of times that's what you actually have to push through to get to the other side. That's where like real value gets created, is you just cared more than anybody else. And so you're willing to suffer through those periods of this that actually rationally does not make sense to do this. But I think that's like what, and I think that's just that's not just a startup thing, right? That's like,
that's an anything thing. You can be making shoes.
Yeah. And it's shoes, it's art, but it's even like, you go to some of these neighborhoods, you drive through a neighborhood, like I was driving through the peninsula the other day, these old neighborhoods, where they're probably made in like the 50s, like post World War II. And when you drive into the street, there's like a brick gate, right? And they have like the name of the neighborhood, in the thing. And you're like, somebody cared, right? Like somebody like sat there and was like, we're going to name the neighborhood and we're going to like make it awesome. And they thought about it, right? Or like the park that's near you, or, like the garden that the person that lives next to you, like, you know, they go out every day and they like put their heart and soul into. Like the place that we live now, our home, it was a husband and wife, and the husband passed away. They didn't have any kids because they were in their 80s, and so, you know, back in the 70s, there's no IVF, so they couldn't have kids. And I didn't realize this for the first year that we lived there, but the woman poured basically her heart and soul into the garden. And what she did was that she timed it so that basically once a month, something else blooms.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Which is amazing. Yeah. And so, like, I didn't realize it until we've basically been through one whole cycle. I was like, wait a second, like, literally there's like, and you're like, wow, like the degree of thoughtfulness that took to make that happen, so that she understood which things to put, and they're all beautiful things, and they like, and so you could just tell she cared, and you're like, why does anybody need to do that? No, but she just cared more than it like makes sense to care. But as a result of that, she created something beautiful. And I think we're like wired for that too, right? That's just sort of like, what does it mean to see something beautiful? It's like you can kind of intuitively sense that somebody put their heart and soul into something, and they just cared more than it made sense to care. Yeah. And then like that, somehow you can like feel that somebody just cared. And that's almost, I think our brains are kind of like wired for beauty in that way. And so that's, I think, you know, for any brand, for any passion project, anything in the world, like a church or a park, or like that entrance to your community, or like the front yard that you have, like there's something people care about, and you can tell when they care. So that's why I think this question of like, can you teach people to care is sort of, it's not exactly the right question. And the question is like, well, what do you care about?
How do you discern fake authenticity and storytelling from real one, though? Because it makes me think of you guys passing on SBF and saying that there were some yellow flags when you were doing the due diligence process, or maybe you met him. Yeah. How can you tell? Because so many people can tell.
It's hard. And I mean, and some people are really good at storytelling. I mean, this is why you can have like serial killers, and this is why you can have Jeffrey Epstein, right? It's just like some people are gifted and can tell these stories in a way that people can't tell if they're being authentic or not. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. Yeah, we sort of dodged SBF and for a whole host of reasons.
What were some of the reasons?
Well, there were like two, and again, we could have been wrong on that. I mean, like if CZ had not sort of kicked that hornet's nest and caused FTT to collapse and that whole cascade, SBF was a seed investor in Anthropic, and that would be worth like $50 billion, and there would be no hole. Like nobody would know about it, right? Because he was also a phenomenal investor. And so we may never have found out. And for all intents and purposes, we would have made a huge mistake. But, there are weird signals around sort of the way that he was conducting some of his fundraisings, the way that he was interacting with the investors, sort of some of the language didn't match some of the behavior, in our opinion. And so that was sort of strange. And then for us, I think some of the math didn't add up. We weren't able to quite figure out where the money was coming from exactly. And so there was just a rational question for us of like, well, is FTX the business and Alameda is supporting FTX? Or is Alameda the business, the hedge fund that they ran, and FTX is the venue
supporting it? Yeah.
And we're like, well,
so you were just thinking for yourself ultimately
in that case as well. But there were I'll spare people the stories, and it's sort of water on the bridge in a lot of senses. But there were a lot of little things that they did in the fundraising process that signaled to us that maybe they were not
honest.
Yeah, that there was like a little bit of saying one thing and doing another. And that's really tough for us. Yeah. That's sort of like a bright line for us. And so we just kind of cut it pretty early. And then understandably from his perspective, again, we could have been wrong on this, right? We've made plenty of other mistakes. But, after we sort of passed twice, then there wasn't really, like the VC just passes on you twice. So you're not really going to have a relationship with them, right? So.
What have you learned from the worst founders you've met?
How do you define worst?
I don't know. However you want to define it.
It's a lot of these things. It's just like honesty, I think, for example. The best founders are just ridiculously honest. And there's no hiding. There's nothing to hide. It just sort of is what it is. And The best founders are storytellers. I think it's all of these things that we've talked about. The best founders, you can't put them in a box. The best founders, have sort of intrinsic motivation as much as they have this extrinsic. So all of those things, I think, are actually hard learned lessons from founders.
What do you feel like you're still learning as an investor?
Oh, I mean, so many things. A lot of it, basically every single thing we talked about, we're still learning. How to pick the right markets, how to think about timing, how to think about which technologies really matter, how to pick great founders. There's, we run a process where we look at the things that we said no to that we were wrong about and trying to learn lessons from that. And that's a continuous process. How to build a brand. It's never done. And I think it's, at least for me, I feel like I found a thing I can do for the next 40 years. And it's that sort of, that ever improving thing, right? Hopefully I'm much better at this in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years and 40 years than I am today. And so, I don't, it's sort of the answer to all the above. Yeah.
You mentioned that opportunity is luxury is one of your guiding principles for life. What are some other ones? Yeah,
it's basically the electric ones. It's, it sort of all stems from this.
So honesty is one.
Yeah. So first, as the founders come first, honesty, and they all sort of stem from this observation that, like the outliers in society are who you need to find and enable. That's sort of the guiding, the framework, and the properties of that market and those people then dictate all these other things. And so put those people first, just be so honest about everything with yourself and markets. Do things at a ridiculously high bar. So, good is not good enough. You have to have conviction. And a lot of the times, if you can develop that conviction, then it's easier to have it. Right? It's like, why do you have conviction matters? And a lot of times I think believing in something and somebody, even when they don't believe in themselves, is actually the secret. And if you have the reason to do it, then it's actually easy to do it. And then moving very, very quickly. I think you have to have a sense of urgency around these things. Like, you can't sit around and wait. You have to be high agency and high urgency, to get stuff done. That's pretty much it. I think if you find your people, if you are honest, if you work really hard and hold yourself to an extremely high quality bar, I think if you have conviction and actually believe in something, then I think if you work hard and work fast with urgency, then like all the good stuff kind of happens.
It's funny because I think two of the principles map to my next question, which is founders come first and conviction. You're married to another founder.
Yeah.
What is it like to have two founders in the house?
I think it works. I mean, we're lucky. We work a lot, but it works because of, we just have flexibility. Founders get flexibility. I think it's also, for us, it's, some people, you want your work life and your home life to be separate, because you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about this kind of stuff at home. And we've just taken the approach that there isn't really work-life separation. It's just, we're doing the things that we do for fun anyway. And we just happen to have those be our careers. And so why wouldn't you want to integrate them? And so, a lot of our friends are our founders. A lot of people we hang out with are founders, and doing interesting things and building stuff, and engineers and researchers. So for us, it doesn't even, like, the career stuff is kind of secondary. It's just sort of, we found our place in the world and we're doing the thing that we want to do as humans and self-expressing. And it just happens to be the case that it all sort of just meshed together with founder stuff.
For anyone listening, any tips for finding your life partner?
Oh, man.
And developing that type of conviction?
No, I have no advice on that. We've been together a long time now, like 16 years. So I think we were just lucky. Frankly, we found each other.
You didn't have any sort of methodology, framework, things that you were looking for?
Yeah, I just met through a friend and hit it off, and here we are, right? 15, 16 years later. So, I don't have any advice. It's one of those things that's just like, there's no process that we went through or anything, right? It's just sort of, and maybe that's the advice. It was just like, it was so easy for us.
Maybe it should be easy.
That it should kind of be easy. We've talked about that, like when we if I don't even feel qualified to give advice in that, because it's just sort of like worked out. It's sort of like if you had a startup and you hit product market fit out of the gate,
What advice can you
like
give?
What advice can you? Is just like, hey, it's just kind of worked. I don't know. We like built a thing and it worked. But yeah, I guess in some sense that is the advice, is like, product market fit trumps everything. So if you
that is true, most of the startups really well.
Yeah. So it's like if you find your person and you kind of click and it's kind of obvious, then like run with it. It's like don't overthink it.
I want to wrap up with 2 questions. First of all, what's the thing you're most proud of outside of your career?
It's an interesting question. I think it's probably the well, there's 2 or 3 answers. And it's proud is like a weird word because that implies like accomplishment or something. And I tend to think of it slightly differently, which is more like, what am I most grateful for? And I think I'm just very grateful that I have managed to find groups of people who have supported and helped me along the way at exactly the right times. And I'm proud. Maybe proud is the right thing here. Is like, I'm proud that I've been able to create value for those people. In some sense, it's like a paid back, but it's also like a pay forward. And I think that's probably the main one. Is like, I'm most grateful for all those people that have helped me along the way. And I'm proud to say, I think that in all of those cases, I've actually managed to make good on that.
And what's your life philosophy in 1 sentence?
That's a tough one. Yeah, that's a really tough one. I think it may very well just be like that sort of that belief that like everybody really, really, really cares about something, and everybody is an outlier at something. And what you need to do is find that thing. And that what we should be doing as a society is finding those people and giving them disproportionate resources to pursue exactly those things that they're outliers in and that they just care the most about. And so systems should be set up to enable those types of people and those sorts of behaviors.
I love it. Avichal, thank you so much for your time. Hey, thank you so much for watching the show. If you're enjoying it, please share it with a friend and subscribe to the show. This is exactly what helps me grow it, and I can bring more exciting guests on. Thank you so much.